All right, what I'd like for us to do in this concluding session is to some extent, reflect back on the conference, what has accomplished, meant to you, what new things you might have become aware of, or new ways of thinking about Poteat, its legacy. So in that sense, a kind of review, consolidation of what we've gone through the last 3 days. But also, I really am interested in the question, where do we go from here? And I'm hoping that this time can be, to some extent, a kind of brainstorming session as to what ideas or suggestions you might have. Might there be a need or a usefulness as you envision it, maybe not even as something that's so important for you, but maybe you imagine is important for other people, of another conference, a seminar, some alternative or other way to transmit and make accessible to others the legacy that we have been becoming renewed in our awareness of and acknowledging and celebrating. Is this something that is really worthwhile investing time, money, and energy into having a share in terms of our participation, having a share in transmitting, passing on?
Could I start off?
Yeah.
I've been thinking about it longer because I typed up the evaluation form based on what Gail provided. Well, first of all, I think that the people a lot of people have been thanked, but the people who haven't been thanked yet that need to be thanked,
Please.
are the people who have kept this alive for so many decades. And the people who remain faithful to it and clear about it and increasingly clarified about it, and who are here to share it because it's three things. And the three things have been manifest this weekend. It's the conviviality, which is, I think, we've talked about how unique it was. Who was it who was saying that people who hate each other are looking for a parking space or whatever?
Lovers of wisdom and haters of each other.
Exactly.
So our philosophy department.
So this is not that. This is conviviality. Secondly, obviously, a lot of ideas to explore and discuss. And the third thing that Dale's been very strong about is about the style of teaching, the pedagogy, the Socratic, etc. Those three things. And so when it came to publicize this, I made a unilateral decision that this was an intellectual reunion, and that it would disrupt it to have another 30 people who had never heard of him and would like to talk about persons, and that was not what this was about. But that does point in a direction, because there could be such an event that's just like a more standard conference, where you're not trying to communicate the ineffable about teaching style or whatever. You're not rehashing the glorious past. You're not. You're opening up to people for whom this is. Now, it was constructed to have an educative, elementary level to it. What is Poteat? What is Polanyi? How do they relate, and so on. But that was really overwhelmed by the larger force of just getting together, which was wonderful. So to me, I think if there's a next step, it has to do with having a more standard academic event with a much larger net thrown. And basically the message being, here's this guy that you need to know about if you're going to do philosophy or theology or whatever, or if you're interested in knowing, etc. You need to know about this guy. So.
Thank you, James. And I'm going to next turn to Nelson, but before I do, just so I don't forget, I want to give us all an opportunity to express our appreciation for James for all of the degree. And that
Tacit
includes,
component.
yeah, and that includes, by the way, the role that he has played, and too, Wally has played in helping the gift of the Mustakas artworks to come and to be accepted here by Yale personnel. And indeed, we've been so, I am so glad and appreciative of how the Yale personnel have themselves been excited and shown profound interest in receiving these gifts. So thanks again.
As soon as I thought of this, I realized that it might not be possible, but I've been to both an NEH Institute and an NEH seminar. Institutes have usually about 24 people, seminars have about 12 people.
What is NEH, I'm sorry?
A National Endowment for the Humanities. And these are usually set on university campuses, and an expert in some subject runs them.
So
But
the
you have-
Institute involves a lot of...
Yeah, the Institute involves
presenters.
more than one faculty person. You know, it might be hard to persuade NEH to fund something about Poteat and Polanyi if they don't know anything about Poteat and Polanyi. But if there's a way to overcome that, it would be a way to get it beyond those of us who
Yes.
studied with Poteat.
And get it advertised too.
Yes.
They're really good at that. I independently thought about that, so, but I really appreciate it coming from you.
Diane has had some experience with that process.
Yeah, you want to say something, Diane?
Well, one was a happy experience, and then I reapplied 2 years later, and the evaluations came back saying Polanyi is a unimportant fringe figure. There is absolutely no reason why we should respond to this request from the Polanyi groupie. You know, I mean, it was a really negative assessment of Polanyi. There's no reason that we should fund this. Now, that was one review panel.
That's right, and I happened to have an opportunity for 1 year to be on a review panel. It wasn't that year, but my sense is in basically in agreement with what you've said. It depends so much on who is on that panel and what prejudices she or he might happen to have.
I'm one of the few people in this room who never studied under Bill Poteat. And I want to express my thanks for being here with each and all of you. I don't know whether Poteat was a towering intellect or not, but it is very clear that he was an authentic person and that he exemplified the incarnation. Not that he was Jesus Christ any more or any less than each one of us is potentially Jesus Christ in every moment of our lives. Given Poteat's, given the place of irony in Poteat's world, I would like to remark an irony which may get me drummed off this campus in about 2 minutes. I'm the writing person. This conference could have been named the primacy of print.
I didn't hear you.
Primacy of print.
Right.
And I'm thinking about the number of times, all the times, in my experience of the conference, when we had papers read rather than talked from.
You're right.
For what it's worth.
Thank you.
The exercise of looking at Poteat through the customary course evaluations showcased for me the my own discontent with the state of higher education. And a lot of those outcomes assessments and clarity of what you're going to do and syllabus is a contract. I mean, it's coming from two places, right? One is the legal department, and the other are the information courses, of which there are many. And the humanities really need to start pushing back. And one of the reasons I think the humanities aren't pushing back is that, for the most part, the rationale for the humanities has not been articulated. I think one thing that this group could do is initiate some pushback. Here was an enormously successful teacher who had a lifelong influence on his students. Now, it would help if some of us had gone on to get major prizes. You know, we'd have more credibility if we were really, but we are who we are because we studied with him. But still in all, I think in Polanyi and Poteat there are resources for actually articulating the reasons that we shouldn't be capitulating to this. And the reasons that universities are making a huge mistake with respect to the humanities. I mean, it's fine for the language courses, it's probably fine for the social science and science courses. It's not fine for the humanities. So that would be a project, and I don't know whether that would be, to get one of our more articulate members to start blogging on it. Because that might be a blog that would be picked up. I don't know whether it would be a collection of essays. I don't know whether it would be a matter of trying to figure out who best could get something into the Chronicle of Higher Education. But I do think that that's something that would actually do some good in the world.
One ally or one area of allies you may very well have for
Okay, safe job.
Bye, Mary.
Okay.
Diversity is in the Department of Education, because the whole movement to fight against Common Core standards has turned into a political movement, and the willingness to evaluate teachers on the basis of the multiple choice tests that students take is, for me, the same issue. I didn't expect to understand anything y'all said all weekend. And I made many connections in my mind at how schools are being vitiated by this sensibility that believes that they can tell whether a teacher is adequate in an elementary classroom or a secondary classroom or not, based on whether the students' test scores are whatever they set for the test scores to be, when nobody knows what a child was thinking when he made that mark. Nobody. Now, if a child reads the test and he does well, then he can't fake a high score, but you can fake a low score. Chunk, 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 chunk. You know that. But we're relegating the evaluation of education to the same kind of thing that Ed was saying about the evaluation forum for university professors. So and those people are getting organized, and those people are getting much more effective in raising their hands and saying, no.
I want to just make a brief remark, and I don't want to cut off other responses to this. Maybe I can come back to this a little bit later, but one of the things that I've been interested in, and for a variety of reasons even directly involved with, but a lot more can be done, especially coming from the framework or orientation provided by a conference like this, and that is looking at, in a fresh and interesting, new, and hopefully post-critical way, at the critical thinking movement. What critical thinking means in light of the critical, post-critical shift. And I think there's a lot to be explored and said there. And I think in terms of the kinds of concerns that Bill Poteat articulated, I think teaching young people all the way through education to be critical on the traditional critical model is really damaging, significantly damaging in the long run. I don't want to take more time right now to say that. It's just that can well bear some serious attention by people such as us. Now, here and here.
I have two thoughts responsible for this. How do we get the word out? One is apparently there are ways to use computers, which leaves me out, to do attribution studies. Well, would it be possible to search databases of articles and books and all sorts of different disciplines to find those authors who have cited Poteat and who have cited Polanyi, and then with those that are still living, to get in touch with them and say, here is something that's afoot that you might want to be a part of. The second thought is, I'm thinking of my own colleagues at UNC Charlotte, former colleagues. Two questions. One, why did you go into the discipline that you now are in? Two, what in your exercise of that discipline leaves you unhappy or unhappy? And not that everybody's going to give the same answer, nor should they. But if people are honest, a lot of folks are going to say, I went in for some reason, for this reason, to teach biology, math, physics, what have you. But here's what it's not offering.
What Sam is talking about here reminds me of what Parker Palmer has been doing by way of holding workshops all around the country. And very often the very questions he raises right at the beginning of the nature of you. And Parker Palmer is he knows Polanyi quite well and draws on Polanyi, so somebody like him might be an ally in this connection too.
Who is Parker Palmer?
Parker Palmer, his first important book as far as we're concerned is a book called To Know As We Are Known, A Spirituality of Education. He's written several since then, Courage to Teach, and there's an earlier book too, but it's not as important as these. But you just Google Parker Palmer and you'll find all sorts of stuff. Probably his own website, but I don't know.
I have a comment to make. It's a reference to a book that I actually have but haven't read. It's by a group of essays by Canadian educators, and the name of it is Body-Mind Education. And so I'll read it, but at the same time, even before I read it, I'll send Dale an email about it and so on. It looks serious, and it looks, I think, in the same direction that we may be looking. And I was surprised to find it. I haven't gotten into it yet, but I just think that's interesting considering we're talking about education, we're talking about body-mind, and often I find the Canadians taking the lead in this sort of thing. They take the lead in psychotherapy and psychoanalytic thinking often. It's just amazes me. So anyway, I'll pass the reference on.
There's another interesting parallel movement that some people among you may be aware of. This is in the discipline of religious studies, but interdisciplinary way within religious studies, not within a narrow specialty. There's been a group formed in recent years, and they published a book called The Participatory Turn in Religious Studies. And we had the Polanyi Society invited and had one of the editors of that collection and an author of one of the major essays in it speak to the Polanyi Society a couple years ago. And though he didn't acknowledge Polanyi at all in what he was doing, it just was everywhere within his own thinking. So he already knew Polanyi well, and he's an expert. His first name is Jacob, and I can't think of his last name right now. He's at California Institute of Integral Studies. Yeah.
Suppose there are Polanyi, following that up, there are Polanyans, and then there are allies. There are Polanyi allies who may or may not know about Polanyi. Suppose the society had a Polanyi Prize, and it was awarded each year. On alternating years, it would be awarded to a Polanyi, and the other year, a Polanyi ally. And I'm in an organization that grants a prize with a little cash part of it each year, and it's just a fantastic way to attract attention to your cause. It really opens the door, and people want to know, well, what is the Polanyi Prize? And then you get applications for the Polanyi Prize, and so on. So that would be a really interesting way and a low overhead way to get the word out.
And maybe also add something about students. Can our students then sort of come and present here, somebody who's interested, because that's how we're going to move. I mean, look at all of us. I'm sorry, I didn't look at maybe look at me, but I'm saying, we're remnants. I mean, so we need to sort of kind of get people, younger people, to sort of kind of, can we get a students, for example, a student prize on some kind of an attempt at kind of dealing with this and getting their interest that there's something, to do. That would, I think, would be, award one of those.
Thank you, Guillermo. That's a great suggestion. Did either of you have your hand up a while back? Oh, excuse me.
I was just struck over the last couple of days about the number of, and I don't know if anybody's noted this, number of Irish connections with Polanyi. Marjorie Green spent a long time in Ireland and actually taught, I think, in Belfast. Did you teach in?
Yes.
In Belfast, yeah. And the other connection is.
Your own graduate advisor.
Yeah, John Hayes as well, yeah, who's actually, I just was talking to somebody else today about that. He's edited a book on Wittgenstein called The Danger of Words. I had forgotten about that. And, and Cathal Daly, actually. He contributed to Intellect and Hope.
Wasn't he originally O Polanyi?
And finally, there's two further connections. Desmond Clarke. He wrote an essay for the book on Marjorie Green, the American Philosophers Collection, Marjorie Green, that Phil Mullins also has the first essay in. Desmond Clarke, who was a philosopher in UCC, that's University College Cork. Also, finally, the only art historian I know to reference Polanyi explicitly in his work is a guy called Richard Schiff, who's really important in art history. Schiff. And he's written a definitive book on Impressionism and Cézanne, actually, but he makes a connection with Polanyi, tacit knowing as a form of aesthetic, embodied production of artistic meaning. And he makes reference to a series of works that the American painter de Kooning painted while, blind paintings he calls them, but he drew, made these drawings with his eyes shut, of the crucifixion, actually, and he references Polanyi in that context.
Do you know that a friend of Poteat's, Donald Weissman, who was an artist and also he did a wonderful introductory volume to teaching art, and he cites Polanyi in a couple of his publications.
The reason I mentioned this guy is he's so important. Richard Schiff is very, very important, and he made that connection with Polanyi in Ireland in a lecture given in UCC that is subsequently published as a book called Doubt. And there's a conversation afterwards with James Elkins with Richard Schiff that tries to categorize and tries to contextualize Polanyi for the philosophy of art. So I think there are a couple of interesting connections there that I think we should be aware of too.
I like to thank everybody because I am a relative newcomer in this network, which is already so long here. And I felt very welcome, and I had really a marvelous fortnight because it feels like a fortnight.